What's up, everybody? This is Ross Dolan from Immolation, and you are listening to RichardMetalFan.
So what's up, guys? I am here backstage at the Masquerade in Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm here sitting with Ross Dolan from the almighty Immolation. How are you doing today, Ross?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me. We are here in the shower room.
Yeah, nothing's more metal than a shower room.
That's right, that's right.
Yeah, so basically this format is I want to kind of go through your catalog, go through all the albums, but before we go into that, let's just dive right back into the beginning. What were the first bands that got you into metal, and what made you want to slap at a bass?
Probably Maiden. Steve Harris was the guy that really got me into playing bass. I was a huge Maiden fan. I mean, I love Maiden, Priest, you know, I love early Van Halen, all that stuff.
Awesome choices.
Yeah, Maiden and Priest were like the first like heavy metal bands that I just obsessed over when I was in my younger, teen years, in the early to mid 80s. So Steve Harris was the guy, definitely. He's the guy that helped me, I guess, understand, the bass's role in music, because, every Maiden production is so bass heavy. So it was easy to, to pinpoint, and he was just a great player. All his little fills and just the way he played, the classic Harris Gallop, and I love the fact that, he was just a finger guy. Yeah, it was Maiden, yeah, all the way, yeah, Steve Harris.
Awesome. So what were your bands pre-Immolation, or was Immolation the first band?
Immolation was the first band for me. I had jammed with a couple of friends, in quote unquote bands, but they weren't real bands because it was just myself and a guitar player, or those kind of situations. So, when Immolation started originally, it was Rigor Mortis, and they had asked me to join because their singer bass player Andrew had left the band. So originally, when they approached me, it was to fill in for him on bass and jump in, and I wasn't supposed to be vocalist or anything. And then shortly after, we decided that since the material that Bob was writing at that point was so different than the Rigor Mortis stuff, we decided to change the name right at the get-go. So yeah, so that's kind of how that went down.
Awesome. So 1991, you dropped the debut album Dawn of Possession, and of course last year was the 30-year anniversary of that. And I feel like with the debut, I feel like you've evolved since then. And would you agree?
Certainly. I mean, it's been a long evolution. We're still evolving. I mean, we went from the first record, which I think probably had a lot of our influences, in there, to the second and third records, which were us, I guess, trying to find our way, find our place. And you could tell we hadn't really quite locked into like the songwriting and all that stuff until maybe Close to or Below, Unholy Cult, that era, So yeah, it's we're still evolving. I mean, this album to me is a huge evolution, even since the last album, since Atonement. So it's, I guess it's good to keep evolving and not stagnate.
Right. So going forward to 1996 with Here and After, there was like 5-year gap between Dawn of Possession and Here and After. From what I've heard, there was like problems with the record label or something. Can you try to elaborate on that?
Well, there were no, I mean, the problems were that we were a young band that was very green and very naive, and we didn't understand fully how the industry, the record and the music industry worked, So we were just teenagers, and we were, all of a sudden we had an album out, and we were on a label, a bigger label. Roadrunner was a huge label at the time. It had all, like, a lot of stuff that we loved at the time, Merciful Fate and that kind of stuff. So
awesome bands.
Yeah. So we were, like, all about that. So after the first album came out, we were a little, I don't know, disenchanted about the whole thing. We were just like, I don't know, maybe we should just kind of move forward and maybe leave the label. And we went down there and we were just like, yeah, we're not really happy. And they let us out of the contract because they saw that we were just young guys and we're just like not happy. So
yeah, so no like lawsuits or nothing.
No.
Hey, you want to go, you go.
In retrospect, they were super gracious about it. Monty Connor, who now is with Nuclear Blast, well, he was the main guy at Roadrunner back in the day. Yeah. He was the A&R guy. He signed all the bands. So he signed us, and he was really such an awesome dude, man. He always gave it to us straight. He had a lot of great advice back then, and he was trying to kind of get that through to us, but we were very pig-headed and stubborn. We didn't want to listen. We're like, no, we're not happy here. Just let us out of our contract, and they did. So
it was just that easy.
Yeah, and and we were just like, wow, okay, but that, be careful what you wish for type thing, because then we didn't have a label, and that's why we had a 5-year gap, because we had just kind of, got through all the demos and finally got signed. It was a huge deal, and then we found ourselves at the first record with no deal. So that's why there was that gap. During that time, we made a demo and we shopped it around, and we had interest from a bunch of labels, but we eventually went with Metal Blade. So
yeah, and was there like pressure to follow up Dawn of Possession? Because usually when bands release a sophomore album, it's like a lot of hype. Will it work or will it slump? Did you feel? I honestly think it's a great album.
Yeah, I mean, you got to realize the first album, you have many years to write your first album. There's no deadlines or anything. We weren't even thinking about records at that time. We were just happy creating, sick, dark, heavy, haunting death metal stuff that we liked, and playing it, making demos and playing the local clubs. So, putting out records was not on the radar for us until we started getting correspondence from the label saying, hey, we're interested in signing you, but we were not about that. So when we did get signed, it was like we were thrust into this new world, the whole industry thing, and we just weren't, we were just clueless. So yeah, I blame ourselves, or the fact that we were just very green at the time, so we didn't always make the best moves. We were very passionate, so sometimes we acted on those feelings, and we probably should have reined that in and stepped back and kind of assessed everything first, before we made the move. But hey, everything happened the way it was meant to happen, so that's it.
Right. Going for next is Failure for Gods. Really great album. And a lot of people say from the last album there was like controversy with the vocals, but I feel like with this album, I guess you've improved your voice since then.
Well, I've never heard anything like that. I mean, my vocal style from the first album to maybe Here and After just probably got a little bit deeper, and so yeah, that I don't know about. I mean, I think Failures was just, I don't know, in some ways experimental, because there was a lot of great stuff on that record. I felt in retrospect maybe some of the arrangements could have been better, could have been tighter, maybe some parts not played as long, some parts maybe expanded on more. But again, we were still kind of feeling our way and still learning how to become songwriters and learning how to become comfortable with who we were as a band,
Right, and then going forward to the year 2000, you got released Close to a World Below.
Yep.
And that was I think the first time you all had a quick turnaround. Did you all pretty much start writing pretty much after Failures for Gods?
Let me think. Yes, we did. There was a quick turnaround there. You are correct. We had a potential tour opportunity that we were trying to rush to get that album done in time for. So that opportunity never happened. So, but it lit the fire to get Close to War Below out quick. Yeah. So, and we felt that was probably a good move, since I think '99 was Failures, and I think 2001 was Close.
It was 2000.
2000. Okay, so you're right. It was a year. Yeah. So yeah, we felt like after the 5-year gap between the first two records, we should probably give the
crank it up.
yeah. Not take so long.
All right. In 2002, you released Unholy Cult, and this year is also the 20-year anniversary of that. And I feel like how you guys have evolved since then, and I pretty much know the answer to this, but I'll ask anyway. Is there a chance we can get a celebration of that album in somehow?
Well, we're gonna play a song tonight off of that record, so
Wow, that's awesome.
That's as celebratory as we're gonna get on this tour. This tour is all about the new record. So we have a lot of new songs on the set list for this tour, but we also like to also touch on some of the older releases. We have a couple off the first record in honor of the 30 years. We have something off of Holy Cult in honor of the 20 years, and then we have a mixed bag of stuff. So
that's right, great. And so moving on to 2005, you released Harnessing Ruin. When was it like going from Unholy Cult to Harnessing Ruin?
It was, well, we had, first of all, that was when Alex left the band in the middle of the Unholy Cult touring cycle. So we had the addition of Steve Shalati, our drummer, who jumped in to save our asses, because our Alex Hernandez, our old drummer, he jumped out in between tours. In other words, we had like 6 weeks in Europe, and then we had a week off, and then we were starting a headlining run in the States. So Alex left the band in the middle of those 2 tours, so it left us with 0 time. Steve was the only guy who we contacted and reached out to out of multiple drummers that was, yes, I think I could do it. I feel confident enough I could do it. He was on a flight to Yonkers, to New York, the next day after he cleared everything with his boss. And he was in my garage in Yonkers with Bob learning the set, for like 3 days before we hit the road. And Steve absolutely fucking killed it. And once that tour was done, we were like, well, he's our new guy. If he wants the position, he's the guy. So, so that was the only. I think big transition between those 2 records. And Harnessing was a very different album. It was a more stripped down album. It was very different from the previous, releases. So in a lot of ways, but I like the record. I love the record. I just don't think the sound, the production of that, did it justice.
Right. Right. So then we get to Shadows in the Light. I think, in my opinion, a very underrated Immolation album. Like, I don't think really anybody talks about that album.
I think it's a good record. It's a much darker record. It was after Harnessing, it kind of went and revisited some of the earlier stuff, I thought, and it was just, I thought it was a cool record. I liked it. We did a lot of touring for that record, and it, seemed to be, get a good response in the live setting and stuff like that. So, I thought it was a cool record, but yeah, I agree. It just kind of got missed.
Yeah. So then we get to probably, in my opinion, the best modern Immolation album, Majesty and Decay. Okay, what was that? What was that going from Shadows in the Light to Majesty and Decay? Do you guys feel like you were onto something with that?
Yeah, well, that was when we signed with Nuclear Blast. So we signed a 3-album deal with them at that point. Majesty was the first album of that record deal. And that's when we decided to shake things up a bit. So we used Paul Orfino once again for all the tracking, but this time we decided to go with Zach Oren to mix and master it. Zach was a younger guy. He was West Coast, and I think it was a good move for us. I think having that mix of Paul's old school sensibilities with Zach's new school approach, more modern approach, I think really allowed us to kind of expand sonically, with the productions. And I think from that point forward, I think the productions, we may not have hit the mark on every record, but I think they just started to get better and better with each record because of that move and the combination. So between that and, having a label behind us that really believed in the band and really wanted to push the band, I think that made all the difference at that point.
Awesome. And then in between Majesty and Decay and Kingdom of Conspiracy released the Providence EP. Was that something the whole fans over before Kingdom of Conspiracy?
It was weird the way that came about. Scion approached us to do. They were doing a bunch of free concerts, for the fans. So they asked us to do a show in New York City. One of the people who worked at the company in the, I guess the department that was focusing on the music end, really liked us. So he got us involved, and we did the show with them, and it was a great experience. Right after we did the show, they said, hey, you guys want to, how would you feel about doing an EP for us, and it was an amazing deal because it was a car company, it was Toyota, so it wasn't.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it wasn't, the record label, and the record label was totally cool with that because they understood that we'd get a tremendous amount of promotion out of that, and we did, and it was a great thing to do. I mean, they really gave us full creative control. They didn't really, they didn't want any of the rights to it. I mean, we owned it, so it was just a cool thing that they did for us to kind of, promote their brand. So we were like, okay, we'll do it. It was cool.
And I remember hearing that you guys sold a bunch of copies for free at shows.
Well, they were all for free. Yeah, that was the deal, and that's what we loved about it. They paid us to record this EP, and they printed up all these free CDs, but they were in just little slip cases. They weren't like jewel cases, but they gave us thousands of them to just hand out for free. So everybody who came out to the shows could take as many copies as they want. It was brilliant.
Yeah, but there's always got to be like that one asshole that would like
Well-
throw it up on eBay and resell it for a higher price.
Well, we had a feeling. You see guys come up and say, "Hey, can I get a couple for my friends?" And we were like, "Okay." And
Total bullshit.
That was going to be the douchebag who was going to sell it, but whatever. Hopefully our fans are
Yeah,
smart
and I
enough.
remember seeing like one of my favorite YouTubers, Infidel Amsterdam, like talk about
Oh,
that
he's
shit.
the best.
Yeah. Shout out to you,
Eddie's the
Ed.
best.
Shout out to you, Ed, if you're watching
Eddie,
this.
better.
Yeah. So, but then going to Kingdom of Conspiracy, what was that like leaping from Majesty to Decay?
Yeah, again, it was. Yeah, I like the album. I think the production had some issues. Of course, it was a little cold in some ways. We weren't that happy with the drums on that one. They're very mechanical sounding. But overall, I thought musically it was a powerhouse of an album. I love the songs on that. It was a great album to perform live. So we still keep Kingdom in the set. We'll keep a bunch of songs on that. And just kind of swap them out periodically. So good album. Our first full concept album, as far as, lyrically, so, yeah.
Yeah, and then your last album, Atonement, which came out in 2017. I love that album, and for that album, you actually re-recorded the song Immolation from Dawn of Possession. What made you guys decide to re-record that song?
Well, that was Albert from Decibel. Albert wanted us to be part of the Decibel Flexi series, that they put out every month in a magazine. So Albert approached us and said, "Hey, would you guys be interested in doing this? We'd love to have you, be part of this." So we said, "Hey, how about we re-record Immolation?" I forget whose idea it was. It could have been Albert's idea, maybe it was Albert, but Albert's just been a good friend and a huge supporter of Immolation for years and years, and just all-around good guy who loves the music and does all he can to promote the music and promote our scene. So we were super happy to do that. So we did it during the Atonement session, but the only difference was we got Harris Johns, who produced the first record, to produce that one song. So that's why that song sounds completely different, compared to the Atonement songs, because the Atonement songs were all mixed and mastered by Zach Oren, and Harris Johns did the mixing and mastering for that one song.
Awesome. And then going forward to the new album, Act of God.
Oh, there it is, In the Flesh.
Which I bought at the merch. Guys, support Immolation, the band.
The man.
Yeah, so to talk about like the making of this album, how did that all come to be, the whole writing and recording process?
The writing process started early on this one. We started writing that in like 2018. Bob had a couple of songs going by then. By the time we finished the touring cycle for Atonement, we probably had about 4 songs already from that written. So we were ahead of the game, and the plan was, after we finished in December of 2019 with the Atonement stuff, to just kind of take a month or 2 off and then just finish the writing for that and just, get the album recorded in 2020 and out, hopefully either late 2020 or early 2021. But then we had, the pandemic hit, and that kind of, threw everything out of kilter. So
virus that I still refuse to name.
Yeah. So unfortunately that happened, and that obviously, put threw a wrench into our plan. So it did allow us a lot more time, and I've said this in every interview. The fact that we had a lot more time, I think, allowed us to kind of, take our time and not really be worried about the deadlines and all that nonsense. So we knew we had, at least a year. I mean, we were realistic when that whole thing hit in March of 2020. We kind of knew it was going to be a long haul. Once you start seeing the whole world shut down, we were like,
I was like, holy shit, what the fuck's going on?
Yeah, I mean, we've never experienced anything like that in our lifetime. So we knew at that point this was going to be bad, and it was going to be a long haul. So we just, used that time to our advantage, and, Bob was able to kind of create 13 amazing songs without having the pressure. Our drummer Steve had ample time to kind of really work his magic in these songs, which he did, absolutely. So it gave us all a chance to kind of understand and just really absorb these songs better, and I think that is reflected in what you hear on the CD, So, it was a weird process because of that, but, honestly, it wasn't that much different than any other process other than we had, all that extra time, so.
Yeah, would you consider this just picking up where you left off after Atonement, or is this almost kind of like a new beginning for Immolation in a way?
Well, it's always a continuation, but I feel like it is a new beginning. We just re-signed a deal with Nuclear Blast, so this is the first of the new album deal with them. So it is kind of like a new beginning. Majesty, Kingdom, and Atonement were like a chapter, and this is a new chapter. But, you know, it is, you know, a continuum of everything we've done. You know, you could hear all the records in this record, especially some of the earlier stuff. I think this album definitely harkens back to the darker side of the band from the earlier days. Not that the later stuff isn't dark. It's all dark, in my opinion. But there's something about this album that I think is, you know, it cuts deep. It's a dark and aggressive one, and that's what I like. I love about this record.
Yeah, and being as this was written like in 2018, did like the songs and like the lyrics and music, everything change over that over time, or did you manage to like stick with that original idea?
Yeah, no, like I said, he had 4 songs done by the end of 2019, but that process continued until May of last year. I think he finished Atonement was the last song he wrote. He finished that in like May, and then we got together in June to practice for the first time in like a year and a half. So yeah, we didn't start writing the lyrics until about 2 weeks before we got into the studio. Once all the music was written, and you know, I had a chance to really absorb the songs and kind of, you know, feel out, you know where we were going with them lyrically. So, you know, it was a process, but it was, you know, it was welcome, especially after the 2 years we had, you know,
right.
Downtime.
And do you think like lyrically it almost kind of like influenced the last couple years?
It's definitely not a pandemic album. It's not. You know, I don't think very little on this album was inspired by the pandemic itself. But you know, there's a lot of stuff on this record that was inspired by what was happening around the world in the last 3 to 4 years. So yeah, part of that was during pandemic time, but not specifically pandemic stuff. You know what I'm saying?
Right. And as a vocalist, do you need to hear music in order to come up with lyrics, or do you usually have like a lyrical concept in mind that can help determine the outcome of the music itself?
That's a good question. I need to hear all the songs on the record before I could really start, you know, aggressively writing, you know, and, you know, putting ideas together. I collect thoughts and ideas, and maybe ideas for titles or concepts, and I make notes of them. And I had about 2 years worth of notes during the pandemic, and you know, after the last tour. But you know, a lot of that stuff never makes it to the table. You know, it's an idea, and I think it's cool at the time, and then when I revisit it, I'm like, nah, that's garbage, you know, or nah, I'm not feeling it. So, but yeah, I really need to hear all the music. I mean, Bob knows that. You know, I had, like, for example, and I've mentioned this before, but I had the idea for Apostle, but we didn't have the music for it yet. So when he finally finished the last song, which was Apostle, I knew that was the song that I could fit that concept to. So that's how I work. It's just weird, but...
Do you usually tend to leave lyrics open to interpretation, or do you engage the listener to what the songs are about?
Definitely. I mean, it's. I think all of our songs are written in a way that you can get, you know, you can get multiple things out of them, you know, and they do touch on, you know, even though they're specific in the way we approach them, like each song has a specific idea behind it, but they are written in a way to kind of, you know, invite the listener to kind of interpret things in their own way. Absolutely, yeah, you're spot on with that.
Can somebody's like own interpretation of the lyrics can maybe look at you differently as an artist?
Sure, because I've had people come up to us and say, "Oh, this song is great." You know, he's like, you know, they'll say like, "Oh, the lyrics are great. It's about this, right?" And I'm like, "Well, you know, if that's what you think it's about, cool." It's not really about that, but you know, and I was always a lyric guy, so I used to always like to read lyrics as soon as I got a record. You know, just sit down, listen to the vinyl, read the lyric sheet, and just kind of imagine what they were saying, what they meant, what the songs were about. You know, and sometimes it was cool if you would read an interview and be like, "Oh, that's cool. That song's about that." But sometimes you read that and you'd say, "Oh, I thought it was about this. I didn't know it was about that." You know what I'm saying? So that's why, you know, I was just like, maybe we won't, you know, give away all the juicy details, you know.
Right. And as a bassist, because I always think the bass has not just an influence on rhythm, but with melody too. So do you usually have like a bass pattern written before your hand and the band writes over that, or do you need to hear what the guitars and the drums they're doing to come up with a bass pattern?
Yeah, usually Bob will create demos, pre-production stuff, and this he's been doing for a number of records now. But Majesty and Decay was the first one where he had a proper, computer program where he could record demos for us properly. So usually he'll write the music and he'll send me a demo with just the guitars and just drums that he'll program on the drum machine in his program, just to give me an idea of how things are going. And then usually we'll sit down together and, we'll go over the parts and I'll see, okay, and that's usually how it goes like that, yeah. So he's writing the music first and then we're putting the bass on top of that and so forth.
All right. And going to the live setting, is there like a similar energy to playing live as to opposed to recording, or they're almost kind of like two separate entities?
Completely different entities, yeah. Studio work is completely different than the live setting. Live setting is just more raw and just it's completely different. There's a lot more energy. There's a give and take between the bands and the crowds. In the studio, it's you're very critical. It's very you're listening constantly and you're making sure you're playing stuff perfect. On the stage, you're up there like a savage, just going off, feeling the music and just getting into it. In the studio, it's completely different. Two different animals, yeah.
All right. I got two more questions for you. And this is the one I always love asking artists. Going back to like the songwriting, how do you know when a song is done?
You just kind of know. We had problems with that in the past, not knowing when to call it, I think with this album, Bob really nailed it. I mean, the songs are perfect in the sense that they're very concise, very much to the point. They're not overblown. Nothing gets overplayed. Every part has a purpose, and all the parts serve the song, and all the songs serve the record. And that's, one of the first times I think we've kind of nailed that in our 34 years with this album. So I think we're all very proud of that.
Yeah.
So.
All right, and the final question I want to ask you is about like the old school death metal scene, because when I first hear death metal initially, everybody would always think Tampa, like Cannibal Corpse, even though they're originally from Buffalo,
Yeah.
New York,
Yep.
New York, and Morbid Angel, DSI. But then there's, of course, you guys from New York, Suffocation, and I think Incantation also originated from there. So I almost feel like the New York death metal scene kind of like is overlooked from like the Tampa scene. How do you feel about like the whole scene from there?
I think people confused the scenes with the studio. It's like people went down to Florida because of Morrisound, and Morrisound, I think, was able to give this music, a better sound. Let's just say it like that. I mean, we were used to hearing cassette demos of bands where shit was raw and dirty, and I love that shit, man. That's like my favorite. I love that. That you can never recreate that. It wasn't perfect, and there was nothing perfect about it, but it was fucking awesome, and it just had feeling. Nobody cared about production values back then. It just if something hits you here, you felt it. You're like, wow, that's awesome. So we came from that mindset. So when Morrisound started, producing death metal bands. You finally got to hear all the instruments in a way you never heard them before. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I think a lot of bands gravitated down there because of Morrisound. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
All the bands you mentioned from Deicide and Cannibal and Malevolent Creation, they're all New York bands, that kind of went down there and just stayed down there.
Yeah, sort of like migrated south.
Yeah, but I mean, the New York scene was a force to be reckoned with, I thought, and it's not a competition. It's not like, oh, our scene's better than your scene. Nobody cared about that. Just geographical locations, somehow people kind of got caught up on that, you know what I'm saying? Obviously, we did things differently. We did things our way. But back then, all the bands were very unique in their sound and their style and their approach, You had Autopsy on the West Coast. You had Sadist, which was more thrashy, but they were just intense. So you had that on the West Coast. Yeah. You had our scene in New York, You had the bands that migrated down to Florida. So you had a lot of healthy scenes. You had the scene in Sweden, again, because of, you had Entombed and Dismember and Unleashed and all these bands.
Great fucking bands.
Yeah. So, even though we all kind of evolved, I believe, from the same roots, all of us. I mean, because, these are all people we all know and have toured with. I mean, we all came from the same place, Maiden and Priest, evolving into like heavier stuff like the early German thrash stuff, Sodom, Creator, Destruction, Hellhammer, Celtic Frost, you know, all of that stuff.
Like all
Yeah, you know, it just got progressively darker and more extreme. So we all came from that same place. So, but we all took those influences and did something different with them, which was cool. You know, it was awesome.
Awesome. So before we go, I just want to thank you for this interview. It's just anything else with Immolation that you would like to promote with Acts of Gods? I know you're currently on this cool tour with Imperial Triumph. Is just anything else you'd like to promote for Acts of Gods?
Just come out to the show. It's a great tour.
And buy the album.
It's a great tour. We got Imperial Triumphant, like you mentioned. Great band out of Brooklyn. Just sick, unique, completely different. And Mortiferum from fucking the Northwest, who are just awesome. Just embodying that sick, old school death metal vibe that I was trying to describe to you earlier. You know, that band encompasses that. They embody that, you know. And for young guys, I love it. I mean, just to watch them every night, it takes me back to that time, you know, which I think is great. To have bands today using that style and that type of stuff as their cues, you know, and inspiration, to me is awesome, you know.
Awesome.
So death metal is definitely alive and well and thriving. So come out to the shows, come support all the bands, and experience live music again.
Awesome. So thank you, Ross.
Awesome, man.
Everybody,
Thank you.
Ross Dolan from Immolation. We'll see you next time.